I was just called out by name, and I want to respond. I see law firms bending a knee to this president, not caring about the larger principles, that those free speech rights, that you could take on any client, why are you bending the knee? I see universities that should be bastions of free speech bending at the knee to this president. I see businesses taking late-night talk show hosts off the air because they dare to insult a president. I see people who want mergers suddenly think that they have to pay tribute to this president. This is what frustrates me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First, Patriots. Today we're diving deep into a Senate floor debate that perfectly encapsulates everything that's wrong with the modern Democratic Party and their complete abandonment of law and order in this country. Before we get started, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell because we're bringing you the truth that the mainstream media won't tell you. And if you want to support real patriotic content and help us keep fighting for America, head over to our Patreon page at patreon.com/AmericaFirst, where you can support this channel for as low as $5 a month. Every dollar helps us continue exposing the radical left's agenda and standing up for conservative values. Now, what you're about to watch from a Senate floor, where we witnessed one of the most disgraceful displays of partisan politics trumping public safety that I've seen in years. We had senators debating police funding bills that came out of committee with unanimous bipartisan support, and yet somehow the Democrats managed to turn even supporting our brave men and women in blue into a political circus.
From Minnesota.
Mr. President, I want to thank the Senator from Nevada for her work in trying to bring these bills to a vote on the floor. I want to thank Senator Grassley, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. I want to thank Senator Durbin, who is there, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, someone who has, by the way, been a leading voice on immigration for years in this chamber. And one of the things I don't understand here is that we have committees for a reason, and we have hearings for a reason. And you can't do one thing on Police Week and not show up and not object and let these bills go through, and then say another a few weeks later in a big speech on the floor. So I like to show up at the markups, and I like to make my case. And I will note that Senator Booker objected to my police reauthorization bill, the cops funding, the Clinton cops funding, long before Donald Trump came into office. So this is not just about this. This is a long dispute over this type of funding that I think is really important right now. Our country's law enforcement professionals do some of the hardest and most important work out there. Every day across America, we ask them to put everything on the line to keep us safe. We ask them to run towards danger and to guide others to safety. And every day across America, they put on their uniforms, their bulletproof vests, their badges, and they get to work. We need to have their backs, and that's what this package of bills does. By the way, bills supported out of the committee from some of the most liberal senators and some of the most conservative senators in this body. We came together. There were bills we would have liked to include that we did not. And if the objection is based on some of this horror show that's going on out of the White House, I agree with that piece of Senator Booker's points. And I have been equally vociferous in taking on this administration. But all of these bills came out of the committee unanimously, and I think they deserve that support on the floor. These bills help fund grants for mental health services for law enforcement. And by the way, if this issue, which I agree with Senator Booker on, about that all these states should be treated the same, well, then I suppose then he will be voting against all of this funding for New Jersey unless this is changed. So we should be watching for that for every single vote instead of just these bills that are in front of us that were supported unanimously out of committee. Grants that help law enforcement combat child sexual exploitation. Grants to help address the recruitment and retention crisis that is plaguing local law enforcement. Senator Cortez Masto's bill, as she explained, would help support the families of fallen law enforcement officers who were targeted and attacked because of their service as law enforcement. My bill, which has been now objected to, so I'm not going to mention it separately or ask for it to be called up separately. My bill, the Retired Law Enforcement Officers Continuing Service Act, done with Senator Grassley, would make sure that law enforcement agencies can continue to utilize the skills that talented law enforcement retirees have built up over their career of public service. There are many retired law enforcement officers who want an active retirement and are eager and ready to serve their community. This might sound like small ball, but when we are looking at how we're going to build up these police agencies, when we don't have enough police, when they're out there at these scenes getting shot at, we've got to be creative in terms of the ideas. And I believe strongly we're going to see another president in the future. We're going to see out of these next elections a check on some of this. But for now, I want to get these programs started. This bill would allow law enforcement agencies across the country to keep using their expertise to review video footage, to solve carjacking cases, or help cyber and financial crime investigations. This bill will also help train the next generation of law enforcement officers. These and the other police bills passed during Police Week, while those police officers are sitting there in the hearing room, when no one objected, they are bipartisan, common sense legislation. They passed the Judiciary Committee unanimously. And I can't help it if someone couldn't change their schedule to be there. I think that these hearings should mean something, and that people should be saying the same thing they say on Police Week when those people are sitting out there in the uniforms who have lost loved ones, as they say on this Senate floor. If we expect law enforcement to respond to some of the most difficult crises at a moment's notice, it's on us to set them up for success. I was there at the National Mall where it rained the entire night, and not a family wasn't there when they thought it was going to be a nicer day. And that was this year on the National Mall to honor those fallen heroes, the Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Candlelight Vigil. Every single officer whose name was read that night was a beloved family member and a friend to so many, including 3 from my state. There was Officer Jamal Mitchell, who was shot and killed in the line of duty just last June, and Officers Paul Elmstead and Matthew Ruge, who along with firefighter paramedic Adam Finseth were killed responding to a domestic violence call in Burnsville, Minnesota. They were called to duty, they answered the call. They actually got 7 kids out of this house and saved their lives. And then one was gunned down. The paramedic came in to try to save him. He was gunned down. And I will never forget hearing from Burnsville Police Sergeant Adam Medlicott, who was there with the 3 fallen first responders when they answered the call. He said of his fallen comrades, "We were there for 7 children. Nothing could be more honorable." He is absolutely right. You can't teach that kind of heroism. Our brave law enforcement professionals deserve to know that the resources they rely on will be there when they need them. And I hope we can work some of this out. I completely agree with Senator Booker about what this administration is doing. But you can't just pick out a few bills that came out of a committee and say, I'm going to stop those, and then allow for other bills that fund other parts of your budget in your state. Thank you.
Senator from New Jersey.
I was just called out by name, and I want to respond. This is what frustrates me. I've passed numerous pieces of legislation for our police officers. I partnered with Chuck Grassley, the incredible senator from Iowa, on a bill very similar to the one I support about police officers who fall in the line of duty. In this case, it was COVID. Police officers who got COVID and died had difficulty proving it was a line of duty death. We passed the legislation to make sure those families get the benefits. I've worked in bipartisan ways and within my own party to make sure we get resources to our police officers. I don't need lectures about the urgency of this. One of my childhood best friends, a police officer in a small town in New Jersey, after a hard day's work, before he even went home to see his family, died by suicide. I don't need somebody implying in any way that this is not vital to me and my state, that we have resources for our police officers. That's why I support this package. That's why I'm a co-sponsor of some of the bills in this package. But what I am tired of is when the President of the United States of America violates the Constitution, trashes our norms and traditions. And what does the Democratic Party do? Comply? Allow him? Beg for scraps? No, I demand justice. Somebody's implying that this to me is not about resources for my state. I will fight for Jersey every day, every night. And when it comes to the police officers of my state, anybody who implies that something is going on other than my allegiance and fealty to the safety, strength, and protection of my police officers because they protect me and everybody in this body. This is a call, folks. The Democratic Party needs a wake-up call. I see law firms bending a knee to this president, not caring about the larger principles, that those free speech rights, that you could take on any client, why are you bending the knee? I see universities that should be bastions of free speech bending at the knee to this president. I see businesses taking late-night talk show hosts off the air because they dare to insult a president. I see people who want mergers suddenly think that they have to pay tribute to this president. And what are the very people here elected to defend the Constitution of the United States saying, oh, well, today, let's look the other way and pass some resources that won't go to Connecticut, that won't go to Illinois, that won't go to New York, that will go to the states he likes. That is complicity with an authoritarian leader who is trashing our Constitution. It's time for Democrats to have a backbone. It's time for us to fight. It's time for us to draw lines. And when it comes to the safety of my state being denied these grants, that's why I'm standing here. Don't question my integrity. Don't question my motives. I'm standing for Jersey. I am standing for my police officers. I'm standing for the Constitution, and I'm standing for what's right. And dear God, if you want to come at me that way, you're going to have to take it up with me. Because there's too much on the line right now in America. As people's due process rights and freedom of the speech rights and secret police are running around this country, picking people up off the streets who have a legal right to be here. There's too much going on in this country. When are we going to stand together for principles that I just heard that we're agreed with? When are we going to stand together? If we don't stand as Democrats, we deserve to lose. But if we stand united, if we stand strong, if we stand with other people, if we tell with a chorus of conviction in America what this president is doing is wrong, if we stand up and speak that way, dear God, we will win. Like all of those people at our ancestors who joined hands together and said, we shall overcome. No, not on my watch. I'm protecting Jersey today. I'm protecting our Constitution today. I'm standing today.
Mr. President.
The senator from Nevada.
Let me break this down for you because this is exactly the kind of swamp behavior that President Trump has been fighting against for years. You had Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota, and while I don't agree with her on much, she was absolutely right to call out the hypocrisy happening on that Senate floor. These police funding bills went through the proper committee process. They had hearings. They were debated. They came out with unanimous support from both Republicans and Democrats. But then when it came time for floor vote, suddenly we have objections. This is the kind of procedural games that the establishment plays while real Americans suffer. While our police officers are getting shot at in the streets, while they're dealing with recruitment crises, while they're struggling with mental health issues from the trauma of their jobs, we have senators playing political theater instead of doing their damn jobs. Let me tell you what was in this package because this stuff matters to every American who cares about law and order. We're talking about grants for mental health services for law enforcement. Do you know what our cops go through every single day? They see the worst of humanity. They respond to domestic violence calls, they deal with child abuse cases. They're the first ones running toward danger when everyone else is running away. And yet we can't even get basic mental health support for these heroes without it becoming a political football. The package also included grants to help law enforcement combat child sexual exploitation. Let that sink in, folks. We're talking about protecting children from predators, and somehow this became controversial because of partisan politics. There were grants to address recruitment and retention crises in local law enforcement. We have police departments across this country that can't find enough good men and women willing to put on the badge because of how they've been demonized by the radical left and their media allies. Senator Cortez Masto had a bill in there to support families of fallen law enforcement officers who were targeted because of their service. These are the families of heroes who paid the ultimate price, and we can't even support them without political games. There was also the Retired Law Enforcement Officers Continuing Service Act, which would allow departments to use the expertise of retired officers. This is common sense stuff, people. When you have experienced officers who want to continue serving their communities, why wouldn't we use their skills and knowledge to train the next generation and help solve crimes? But here's where it gets really rich. Senator Booker from New Jersey stands up and starts lecturing everyone about constitutional principles and authoritarian overreach. This is the same party that spent 4 years trying to undermine a duly elected president through bogus investigations and impeachment attempts. This is the same party that cheered when tech companies censored conservative voices and when the FBI was targeting parents at school board meetings. But now they're concerned about constitutional principles when it comes to supporting police officers. Booker claimed these grants wouldn't go to states like Connecticut, Illinois, or New York, but would go to states the president likes. This is pure conspiracy theory nonsense. These are federal grants that go through established procedures and criteria. They're not handed out based on political favoritism. But this is how the left operates. They create these fictional narratives to justify their obstruction of basic governance. And then Booker has the audacity to invoke civil rights language, comparing his opposition to police funding to the civil rights movement. This is offensive on so many levels. The civil rights movement was about expanding freedom and equality. What Booker is doing is abandoning the very communities that depend on law enforcement for their safety and security. The overwhelming majority of Americans, including minorities in urban areas, want adequate police protection. They want safe neighborhoods. They want criminals held accountable. Let me tell you what's really happening here. This is the logical conclusion of the defund the police movement that took hold in the Democratic Party. Even when they can't openly say they want to defund the police anymore because it's politically toxic, they find ways to obstruct and undermine law enforcement through procedural objections and manufactured outrage. Senator Klobuchar mentioned the candlelight vigil at the National Mall where she honored fallen officers, including 3 from Minnesota. Officer Jamal Mitchell, who was shot and killed in the line of duty. Officers Paul Elmstray and Matthew Ruggie, along with firefighter-paramedic Adam Finseth, who were killed responding to a domestic violence call in Burnsville. These heroes saved 7 children from that house before they were gunned down. 7 children are alive today because these brave men answered the call of duty. This is what we're talking about when we say we need to back the blue. These aren't abstract policy discussions. These are real people with real families who put their lives on the line every single day to keep the rest of us safe. And when they make the ultimate sacrifice, the least we can do is make sure their families are taken care of and that their colleagues have the resources they need to do their jobs effectively. But the modern Democratic Party has been captured by radical activists who view police as the enemy rather than as the protectors of our communities. They've bought into this false narrative that law enforcement is systemically racist and oppressive, ignoring the fact that police officers of all backgrounds serve with honor and distinction in departments across the country. This anti-police sentiment isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. When you undermine law enforcement, when you make it harder for them to do their jobs, when you demonize them in the media and on social platforms, you're making every community less safe. Crime goes up, victims suffer. And it's usually the most vulnerable communities that pay the highest price. We've seen this play out in cities across America where progressive prosecutors refuse to prosecute criminals, where police budgets have been slashed, where officers have been vilified to the point that many good cops have simply walked away from a job. The result has been predictable increases in violent crime, property crime, and general lawlessness. And now we see it playing out even at the federal level, where basic support for law enforcement becomes a partisan issue. This shouldn't be controversial. Supporting police should be as American as apple pie. These men and women take an oath to serve and protect. They undergo extensive training. They're held to high standards. And yes, when there are bad actors, they should be held accountable through proper legal processes. But that doesn't mean we abandon law enforcement altogether or make their jobs unnecessarily difficult through political obstruction. What's particularly galling about Booker's performance is his claim to be protecting the Constitution while simultaneously undermining one of government's most basic functions, providing for public safety. The Constitution doesn't just protect individual rights, it also establishes government's responsibility to maintain order and protect citizens from those who would do them harm. When Booker talks about authoritarian overreach, he's using the language of resistance to distract from his own party's failure to govern responsibly. Supporting police isn't authoritarian, it's basic governance. Wanting criminals prosecuted isn't fascism, it's justice. Expecting elected officials to support the safety and security of their constituents isn't tyranny, it's democracy. The irony is that many of the same people who lecture us about democracy and constitutional principles are the ones who have spent years trying to weaponize government agencies against their political opponents, who have supported censorship of opposing viewpoints, and who have cheered when conservative voices were silenced or conservative organizations were targeted by federal agencies. This debate also highlights the broader problem of how our political system has become dysfunctional. We have committees that do serious work, hold hearings, bring in experts, and hammer out bipartisan compromises. But then when those carefully crafted bills reach the floor, they get held hostage to whatever political narrative is dominating the news cycle that week. This isn't how governance is supposed to work. When you have unanimous committee support for legislation, especially legislation that addresses critical public safety needs, there should be a presumption that it moves forward unless there are serious substantive objections. But instead, we get performative opposition designed more for social media clips and fundraising emails than for actual policy outcomes. And let's be clear about what this means for the police officers and their families who are directly affected by this obstruction. When mental health grants get held up, it means officers don't get the counseling and support they need to deal with job-related trauma. When recruitment and training grants are delayed, it means departments can't hire and properly prepare the next generation of officers. When support for fallen officers' families gets caught up in political games, it means Gold Star families don't get the assistance they deserve. This is real-world impact from what might seem like inside-the-beltway political maneuvering. Every day that these bills are held up is another day that police departments across the country are operating without resources they desperately need. Senator Klobuchar was absolutely right to point out that if you're going to object to police funding based on principled opposition to the current administration, then you should be consistent and object to all federal funding that might benefit your state. But of course, that's not what happens. Selective outrage and selective principles are the hallmarks of modern democratic politics. The bottom line is this: we need leaders who will put public safety ahead of political posturing. We need senators and representatives who understand that supporting law enforcement isn't a partisan issue, it's an American issue. We need elected officials who will show up to committee hearings, do the hard work of crafting good legislation, and then follow through by supporting that legislation on the floor. What we don't need is more grandstanding, more manufactured outrage, and more obstruction of basic governmental functions. The American people deserve better. Our police officers deserve better. And the communities that depend on law enforcement for their safety and security definitely deserve better. This is why elections matter, folks. This is why we need to elect conservatives who understand that law and order isn't just a campaign slogan, it's a fundamental requirement for a functioning society. We need leaders who will stand with our police officers, support our law enforcement agencies, and prioritize public safety over political theater. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure you like this video and subscribe to America First for more content that cuts through the mainstream media spin and tells you what's really happening in Washington. And remember, you can support our work by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/America First for just $5 a month. Your support helps us continue fighting for conservative values and holding our elected officials accountable. Until next time, this is America First, and we'll keep fighting for the principles that make this country great. God bless America, and God bless our brave men and women in blue who keep us safe every single day.